Hi, I'm Mica, and 3 years ago at Christmas dinner, my brother Ryan looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're nothing," while the whole family sat there in uncomfortable silence. What he didn't know was that his wife's boss would call me 20 minutes later, and the word that came out of his mouth would change everything. CEO. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The snow was falling heavy outside my parents' house in Lakewood that Christmas Eve, the kind of thick, wet flakes that stick to everything and make the world look like a postcard. I sat in my Honda Civic for a moment before going inside, watching the warm golden lights spill from the windows of the house I grew up in. Through the front window, I could see Ryan already holding court in the living room, his arms gesturing dramatically as he told some story that had Mom and Dad hanging on every word. I took a deep breath and checked my phone one more time. 3 missed calls from my assistant Emma, 2 from my COO, and a string of texts about the Henderson Industries merger that was supposed to close after the holiday. I silenced the phone and slipped it into my purse. Tonight was about family, even if family had a way of making me feel like I was still the awkward teenager who spent Christmas mornings cleaning up wrapping paper while Ryan showed off his latest achievements. The front door opened before I could knock. Mom appeared in her festive red sweater, the same one she'd worn every Christmas for the past 5 years, her face lighting up with genuine warmth. "Mica, sweetheart, you made it!" I was starting to worry about the roads. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, the sense of her famous sugar cookies that had been baking all day. "Sorry I'm late, Mom." Traffic was brutal coming down from downtown. I handed her the bottle of wine I'd brought, a vintage Cabernet that had cost more than my parents spent on groceries in a week, though I'd never tell them that. "Downtown." Dad's voice came from behind Mom, warm but tinged with the familiar note of concern that crept in whenever we talked about my living situation. "I still don't understand why you insist on staying in that expensive loft when you could get so much more space out here in the suburbs." I kissed his cheek, breathing in the familiar scent of his aftershave, mixed with wood smoke from the fireplace. "I like being close to work, Dad." "The commute would kill me." Ryan's voice boomed from the living room before Dad could respond. "Is that my little sister? Get in here, Mica." "Jessica's been dying to hear about your latest temp job adventures." The words hit me like a slap, casual and cutting in the way only family could manage. I forced a smile and followed my parents into the living room, where Ryan was sprawled on the couch like he owned the place, one arm draped around his wife Jessica. He'd put on weight since his wedding 2 years ago, his face fuller and his hairline creeping back, but he still carried himself with the same confident swagger that had made him the golden child our entire lives. Jessica looked up from her phone with a polite smile. She was prettier than I remembered, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the snow, wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Mica, so good to see you again." Ryan was just telling us about his promotion to regional sales director. "Congratulations," I said, meaning it despite everything. Ryan had always been good at sales, probably because he genuinely believed everything he said, even when it wasn't entirely true. "That's a big step up. 20% raise, corner office, company car." Ryan ticked off the benefits on his fingers. "Not bad for someone who barely graduated college, right, Dad?" Dad chuckled, settling into his recliner with the satisfaction of a man whose son had exceeded expectations. "Your mother and I are proud of both our children." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Ryan with his promotion and Mica with her. He paused, searching for the right words. Her determination to make it on her own in the city. The pause said everything. While Ryan's achievements were concrete and easy to understand, mine remained a mystery to my family. They knew I worked in tech, knew I lived in an expensive downtown loft, knew I drove a decent car and dressed well, but the specifics of my job had always been deliberately vague. It was easier that way, easier than trying to explain what I did to parents who still thought the internet was primarily for email and weather reports. "Speaking of making it on your own," Ryan said, leaning forward with the predatory smile he'd perfected in high school. "How's the job hunt going? Still doing that consulting thing?" Something like that, I replied, taking a seat on the opposite end of the couch and accepting the glass of wine Mom pressed into my hands. The Pinot Grigio was sweet and cheap, the kind my parents bought by the case at the grocery store, but I sipped it gratefully. You know, Jessica said, her voice taking on the helpful tone that people used when they were about to offer unsolicited advice, my company is always looking for administrative assistants. The pay isn't amazing, but it's steady work, and they offer good benefits. I could put in a word for you with my boss, Mr. Thompson. The offer was well-intentioned, I knew that, but it still stung. Administrative assistant. After everything I'd built, everything I'd accomplished, my sister-in-law was offering to help me get an entry-level job answering phones and filing papers. That's really kind of you, Jessica, but I'm actually doing pretty well where I am. I kept my voice light, non-committal. Ryan snorted. Come on, Mica, we're family here. You don't have to pretend. Living paycheck to paycheck, bouncing between temp jobs, renting some tiny studio apartment downtown because you can't afford anything bigger. There's no shame in needing help. I'm not renting a studio, I said quietly, and I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. Sure you're not. Ryan's tone was patronizing, the same one he'd used when we were kids, and he'd catch me in some small lie. Look, I get it. You want to seem successful, independent, but at some point you have to face reality. You're 28 years old, Mica. Most people our age are married, buying houses, starting families. What do you have to show for all this city living and career chasing? The question hung in the air like smoke from the fireplace. Mom busied herself arranging cookies on a plate, her discomfort obvious. Dad stared into his beer bottle. Jessica shifted uncomfortably beside Ryan, probably realizing her husband was being crueler than necessary, but not knowing how to stop him. I have my work, I said simply. Work, Ryan repeated, rolling the word around like it tasted bitter. Right, your mysterious consulting job that you can never quite explain. Come on, Mica. What do you actually do? And don't give me some vague answer about helping companies with their technology. We're not idiots. I set down my wine glass, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that came whenever this topic arose. For 3 years, I'd kept my real job secret from my family, not out of shame, but out of self-preservation. The last time I'd tried to share a professional achievement with them, Ryan had spent an hour explaining why my success was probably just luck, or someone else's work. It was easier to let them think I was struggling than to deal with his jealousy and dismissiveness. I help companies optimize their digital infrastructure, I said, using the same generic description I always gave. It's technical stuff. Pretty boring, actually. Technical stuff, Ryan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Right. You know what I think? I think you're embarrassed because you're not doing as well as you pretended you would when you left for college. Remember that, Mom? How Mica was going to conquer the world with her computer science degree. Show all of us small-town folks how it's really done? The memory stung because it was partially true. I had been cocky when I graduated. Full of confidence and big dreams, I'd moved to Denver with a plan to revolutionize the tech industry, and for the first year, reality had been a harsh teacher. But that was a long time ago, and a lot had changed since then. Ryan, Jessica said softly, placing a warning hand on his arm. Maybe we should talk about something else. No, I think this is important, Ryan said, shaking off her touch. Mica needs to hear this. You can't keep living in this fantasy where you're some big-shot tech executive. Look around you, look at what real success looks like. He gestured around the living room, at the family photos and holiday decorations. Jessica and I just bought a 4-bedroom house in Highlands Ranch. We're talking about starting a family next year. I've got a career track that could take me to VP level in 5 years. That's what stability looks like, Mica. That's what having your life together actually means. I felt something cold and hard settle in my stomach. This wasn't just Ryan being competitive or showing off. This was him actively trying to tear me down, to make me feel small and unsuccessful in front of our parents. The worst part was that they were letting him do it, sitting there in uncomfortable silence while he systematically dismantled whatever confidence I might have about my life choices. You're right, I said quietly. Your life does look very stable. Ryan smiled, apparently taking this as concession. I'm not trying to be mean, Mica. I'm trying to help you see that there's another way. You don't have to keep struggling, pretending to be something you're not. There's no shame in admitting that your big city dreams didn't work out the way you planned. What do you think I should do? I asked, genuinely curious to hear his solution. Get a real job, something with benefits and a future. Maybe move back to Colorado Springs. Find a nice guy who doesn't care that you're not some high-powered career woman. Stop pretending to be something you're not, and just be happy with a normal life. The room fell silent, except for the crackling of the fire and the distant sound of Christmas music playing from the kitchen radio. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in pristine white that would be dirty slush by morning. A normal life, I repeated slowly. Exactly. There's nothing wrong with being ordinary, Mica. Most people are ordinary. The sooner you accept that about yourself, the happier you'll be. That's when he said it. The words that would replay in my mind for months afterward. Face it, little sister. When you strip away all the pretense and the fancy loft and the vague talk about consulting, you're nothing. And maybe that's okay. Maybe you don't have to be something special to be worth loving. The words hit me like a physical blow, so unexpected and cruel that for a moment I couldn't breathe. Nothing. He'd called me nothing, and he'd done it with such casual certainty, such complete conviction, that it was clear he truly believed it. Mom gasped softly. Dad's face went red with anger and embarrassment. Jessica looked horrified, her hand flying to her mouth as if she could somehow take back her husband's words. Ryan Michael Peterson. Mom's voice was sharp with the kind of authority that could still make both of us feel like children. That was completely uncalled for. What? I'm just being honest. Someone has to tell her the truth. The truth? Dad's voice was dangerously quiet. The truth is that your sister has always been twice as smart as you. And if you can't see that, then you're not as intelligent as I thought you were. Ryan's face flushed red. Smart doesn't pay the bills, Dad. Smart doesn't buy houses or support families. Mica can be as smart as she wants, but if she's not applying it to anything meaningful, what's the point? I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. The room seemed to tilt slightly, as if the foundation of everything I thought I knew about my family had shifted. I'd known Ryan was competitive, knew he resented what he perceived as my parents' favoritism toward my academic achievements, but I'd never imagined he held such deep contempt for me as a person. I should go, I said quietly, reaching for my purse. Mica, honey, please don't leave, Mom said, rising from her chair. Ryan didn't mean what he said. He's had too much wine. I haven't had too much wine, Ryan protested. I meant every word. Someone needs to give Mica a reality check, and apparently, it's going to be me. You don't know anything about my reality, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You don't know anything about my life, or my work, or what I've accomplished. Because you won't tell us, Ryan exploded, jumping to his feet. You show up here with your mysterious job and your expensive clothes, acting like you're so much better than the rest of us. But you won't actually say what you do for a living. If you were really successful, really important, you'd be proud to share it. The fact that you keep it secret tells me everything I need to know. He was right about one thing. I had kept it secret. But not for the reasons he thought. My phone buzzed in my purse, a sharp vibration that cut through the tension in the room. Then it buzzed again. And again. I ignored it, focused on the family drama unfolding in front of me, but the buzzing continued, insistent and urgent. Sorry, I muttered, pulling out my phone. I should probably... The screen showed 7 missed calls from Emma, 3 from my COO David, and 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. There were a dozen text messages, all marked urgent. My heart started to race as I scrolled through them quickly. Henderson Industries wants to move up the timeline. They want to close tonight. Their CEO is flying out tomorrow morning. It's now or never. Mica, please call me. The whole deal could fall apart if we don't get your signature tonight. Everything okay? Jessica asked, noticing my expression. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. The Henderson Industries acquisition had been 18 months in the making. A merger that would double the size of my company, and establish us as one of the major players in the Denver tech scene. The timing was terrible, but these kinds of opportunities didn't wait for convenient moments. Work emergency, I said finally. I really do need to go. On Christmas Eve? Ryan laughed harshly. Right. What kind of consulting job has emergencies on Christmas Eve? Let me guess. Someone's printer is broken, and they need you to turn it off and on again? The phone rang in my hand before I could respond. Emma's name flashed on the screen, and I knew I had to take it. Emma, I'm with my family. Can this wait until tomorrow? Mica, thank God. Henderson's people are at the office right now. Their lawyers, their CFO, even their CEO flew in from San Francisco. They want to sign tonight before their fiscal year closes, but they're threatening to walk if we can't get everyone here in the next 2 hours. Tonight? But it's Christmas Eve. I know, but their CEO is adamant. He says if we can't show the same level of commitment to this deal that they're showing, then maybe we're not the right partner for them. Mica, this is a $40 million acquisition. We can't let it slip away over a holiday. $40 million. The number echoed in my head as I looked around the living room at my family, all of them watching me with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. Ryan was smirking, clearly convinced that this was all some elaborate charade I was putting on to avoid admitting he was right about my failures. I'll be there in an hour, I said into the phone. Wait, Mica. Emma's voice was urgent. There's something else. Henderson's CEO specifically asked about meeting you. He said his research team was impressed by your background, and he wants to shake hands with the person who built this company from nothing. The person who built this company from nothing. The words hung in the air as I ended the call, still staring at my phone. Around me, my family waited for an explanation that I wasn't sure I was ready to give. Let me guess, Ryan said with satisfaction. Your boss needs you to work a double shift at the call center. Maybe cover for someone who actually has a family to spend Christmas with. That's when Jessica's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. It's Mr. Thompson. Why would my boss be calling on Christmas Eve? She answered with her professional voice, the one she used at work. Hello, Mr. Thompson. Merry Christmas. The conversation was brief, mostly Jessica saying yes, and I understand, and of course. When she hung up, she looked confused and slightly worried. Everything okay? Ryan asked. That was strange. Mr. Thompson said he's at some business meeting downtown, and he ran into someone who mentioned they knew me. He wanted to know if I'd ever talked about my sister-in-law, Mica Peterson, the one who lives downtown. The room went very quiet. I felt my heart start to pound, a mixture of dread and anticipation flooding through me. What did you tell him? I asked. I said yes, that you're my husband's sister. He seemed really surprised. He said he'd call me back in a few minutes with more details, but he wanted to make sure he had the right person first. Ryan was looking back and forth between Jessica and me, his confident smirk starting to fade. Why would your boss care about Mica? Did you mention her at work or something? No, never. I mean, I might have mentioned having a sister-in-law who works in tech, but nothing specific. I don't even know what company she works for. The silence stretched out, broken only by the ticking of Mom's antique mantel clock and the soft hiss of logs shifting in the fireplace. I could feel them all looking at me, waiting for an explanation, but I found myself frozen between two worlds. The world where I was Ryan's struggling little sister, the family disappointment who couldn't quite get her life together, and the world where I was CEO of a tech company that was about to close a $40 million acquisition. Jessica's phone rang again. Mr. Thompson? She answered quickly, her voice tight with curiosity. The conversation that followed changed everything. Yes, she's here right now. Yes, that's her name. Wait, what? Are you sure? CEO of what company? Jessica's eyes grew wide as she listened, her gaze fixed on me with growing astonishment. TechFlow Solutions? That's a huge company. I've seen their building downtown. Ryan's face went pale. Dad leaned forward in his chair, suddenly alert. Mom's hand flew to her throat in surprise. Mr. Thompson, are you absolutely certain? Mica Peterson, CEO of TechFlow Solutions? Jessica paused, listening. He wants to what? He wants to schedule a meeting to discuss partnership opportunities? With my sister-in-law. The phone slipped from Jessica's hand, clattering onto the coffee table. She stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of shock, respect, and something that might have been awe. Mica, she whispered. Mr. Thompson says you're the CEO of TechFlow Solutions. He says his company has been trying to get a meeting with you for 6 months. He says you're one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in Denver. Ryan made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a choke. That's impossible. Mica works consulting jobs. She lives in some tiny apartment and drives a Honda. She's not a CEO of anything. But even as he said it, I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. The expensive clothes I wore that I'd never quite explained. The downtown loft he'd never seen. The way I'd always been vague about my work, deflecting questions rather than answering them directly. Is it true? Mom asked softly. Mica, honey, are you really a CEO? I looked around the room at my family, at the people who had known me my entire life but had never really seen me, at Ryan, who had just called me nothing with such casual cruelty, at Jessica, who had offered to help me get a job as an administrative assistant, at my parents who loved me but had never quite known what to make of my choices. Yes, I said simply, I am. The word hung in the air like a held breath. Yes, such a simple word. But it seemed to rewrite the entire narrative of who I was supposed to be in this family. I watched as understanding dawned on their faces one by one, each of them processing this information in their own way. Dad was the first to speak, his voice quiet and wondering. TechFlow Solutions, that's the company that redeveloped the entire downtown district, isn't it? The one that brought all those tech jobs to Denver? I nodded, feeling strangely detached from the conversation, as if I were watching it happen to someone else. Among other things, yes. How long? Mom asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How long have you been running this company? 4 years. I founded it right after I moved to Denver. Ryan laughed, but it was a broken sound, like glass shattering. This is insane. You're telling me that for 4 years, while I've been patronizing you about getting a real job, you've been running a multi-million-dollar company? That's exactly what I'm telling you. But why? Jessica's voice was plaintive, confused. Why didn't you ever say anything? Why let us think you were struggling? The question I'd been dreading, the one I'd hoped I'd never have to answer. I looked around the room at these people I loved, despite everything, and tried to find the words to explain 4 years of calculated silence. Because every time I tried to share anything about my work, it got dismissed, or minimized, or explained away as luck. I looked directly at Ryan as I spoke. Remember my first year here? When I mentioned landing my first major client, a renewable energy company that wanted to overhaul their entire digital infrastructure. Ryan's face flushed red, but he said nothing. You spent 20 minutes explaining to everyone how I'd probably just answered some phones and filed some paperwork, that the real work was done by men with MBAs and decades of experience. You said I was probably just the diversity hire they used to make themselves look good. I didn't mean, you meant every word. I cut him off. Just like you meant it tonight when you called me nothing. So I stopped sharing. It was easier to let you think I was failing than to deal with your constant need to diminish anything I accomplished. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's eyes were bright with unshed tears, and Dad looked like he'd been physically struck. Jessica was staring at her hands, probably remembering every conversation we'd had where she'd offered to help me find real work. My phone buzzed again, pulling me back to the present crisis. Emma's text was short and urgent. Henderson CEO getting impatient. Need you here ASAP. I really do have to go, I said, standing and reaching for my coat. There's a $40 million acquisition that's supposed to close tonight, and apparently, I'm the only one who can sign the papers. $40 million. Dad repeated faintly. $40 million. I confirmed. It'll double the size of the company and establish us as one of the top 3 tech firms in the Rocky Mountain region. Ryan slumped back into the couch as if all the air had gone out of him. This is impossible. You drive a Honda Civic, You wear clothes from Target. I couldn't help but smile at that. The Honda gets great gas mileage, and I like Target. Success doesn't mean you have to be wasteful or pretentious, Ryan. I learned that from Mom and Dad. But your apartment, Jessica said weakly. You said you lived downtown, but you never invited us over. We assumed it was because you were embarrassed about how small it was. It's a 3,000 square foot loft with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Confluence Park. I never invited you over because I wanted to keep my personal life separate from my professional life. I wanted to have one place where I could just be your sister, not TechFlow's CEO. The admission hung heavy in the room. I'd created this separation, deliberately, built walls between the different parts of my life, because I'd learned early on that my family couldn't handle the truth of who I'd become. They needed me to be the struggling little sister, the one who validated their choice to stay safe and conventional. My success threatened their worldview in ways they couldn't articulate. How much? Ryan's voice was hoarse. How much is the company worth? I hesitated, knowing that this number would change everything between us permanently. Last valuation put us at $85 million. After the Henderson acquisition closes, we'll probably be worth closer to $150. The number landed like a bomb in the quiet living room. Dad's beer bottle slipped from his nerveless fingers, foam spilling across the coffee table. Mom actually gasped aloud. Jessica just stared at me with her mouth open. $150 million. Ryan said slowly, as if testing how the words felt in his mouth. You're worth $150 million. The company is worth that much. I own 60% of it, so personally. I shrugged, uncomfortable with reducing everything I'd built to a dollar amount. It's substantial. Substantial. Ryan repeated with a bitter laugh. Jesus Christ, Mica, I spent tonight telling you that you were nothing, and you're worth more money than I'll see in 10 lifetimes. It's not about the money, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew how hollow they sounded. It wasn't about the money for me, but I understood that for Ryan, everything was about the money. His worth, his success, his identity were all tied up in salary figures and net worth calculations. My phone rang, Emma's ringtone cutting through the family drama with urgent necessity. Mica, where are you? Henderson's CEO is threatening to walk. He says he came here in good faith on Christmas Eve, and if we can't show him the same respect, then maybe we're not the kind of partners he wants to work with. I'm leaving now. Give me 45 minutes. What do I tell him? I looked around the room at my family, all of them watching me with expressions ranging from shock to hurt to something that might have been pride. Tell him that CEO obligations don't take holidays, and I'll be there shortly to personally ensure this deal closes tonight. When I hung up, the silence stretched between us like a chasm. Everything had changed in the space of 20 minutes, and I wasn't sure any of us knew how to bridge the gap between who they thought I was and who I actually was. I have to go, I said again, pulling on my coat. This really can't wait. Of course it can't, Ryan said, his voice flat and defeated. Because you're the CEO. Because you're important. Because you're everything I said you weren't. I paused at the door, my hand on the knob, and looked back at him. I never needed you to believe in me, Ryan. I would have liked it, but I didn't need it. I built something incredible without your support, and I'll continue building whether you're proud of me or not. Proud, he repeated the word, like it tasted strange. How can I be proud of something I didn't even know existed? The same way you were proud of yourself for achievements I never cared about. I replied gently. You don't have to understand someone's success to respect it. Mom stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Mica, wait, please. Can we talk about this tomorrow, after your meeting? We have so much to discuss. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what there was to discuss. The truth was out now. All of it laid bare in their living room like scattered Christmas presents. There was no going back to the comfortable fiction we'd all been living with. I'll call you tomorrow, I promised, after I get some sleep and figure out how to process all of this. Processing, Dad said with a weak smile. That sounds like something a CEO would say. Dad. I started, then stopped. There would be time later for all the conversations we needed to have, all the explanations and apologies and reckonings. Right now, I had a company to run and a deal to close. The drive downtown was surreal. The streets were mostly empty, just a few cars carrying people to late Christmas Eve services or family gatherings. The snow had stopped falling, leaving everything blanketed in pristine white that reflected the city lights, and made Denver look like something out of a fairy tale. I used the hands-free system to call Emma as I navigated the familiar route from suburban Lakewood to downtown Denver. "Thank God," she answered on the first ring. "How far out are you?" 20 minutes, what's the situation? Henderson's team is set up in Conference Room A. Their CEO, Marcus Henderson, flew in from San Francisco specifically for this. Their lawyers have reviewed all the contracts, their CFO has signed off on the financials, and they're ready to move forward. But Henderson himself insists on meeting you personally before he signs anything. What do you know about him? Old school tech guy, built his company from a garage startup in the 90s, very focused on personal relationships and handshake deals. His research team has been following TechFlow for 18 months, ever since we landed the Colorado Springs municipal contract. I nodded, remembering that deal. It had been a breakthrough moment for the company, our first major government contract, and the one that had really put us on the map as a serious player in the regional tech scene. Emma, I need you to know that tonight got complicated. My family found out about the company. There was a pause. Found out? I thought they knew you were CEO. They thought I was a temp worker living paycheck to paycheck. I've been keeping it from them for 4 years. Jesus, Mica, 4 years? Why? The same question Jessica had asked, the one I'd been asking myself as I drove through the empty streets. Because it was easier than dealing with their reactions. Because I wanted to keep one part of my life uncomplicated. Because I was afraid they'd never see me the same way again. And now? Now they know the truth, and I have no idea what happens next. Well, whatever happens with your family, you've got a company to run and a deal to close. Henderson's not going to wait much longer. The TechFlow building rose 37 floors into the Denver sky, its glass exterior reflecting the Christmas lights strung throughout the downtown district. I'd bought the building 2 years ago when we outgrew our original space, and every time I saw it, I felt a surge of pride mixed with disbelief. Sometimes I still couldn't quite believe that the awkward college graduate who'd moved to Denver with nothing but a computer science degree and a head full of dreams had built something this substantial. The security guard, Marcus, was waiting for me in the lobby. He was supposed to be home with his family, but he'd volunteered to stay late to ensure everything went smoothly with the Henderson meeting. "Evening, Ms. Peterson. I've got elevators ready for you, and I cleared the executive parking level so Henderson's people would have easy access." "Thanks, Marcus. I appreciate you staying late on Christmas Eve." "No problem at all. This is a big night for the company, right?" The whole team's been talking about this Henderson deal for months. As the elevator climbed toward the 35th floor where our executive offices were located, I caught sight of my reflection in the polished steel doors. I looked tired, emotionally drained from the family confrontation, but underneath that I could see something else. Relief, maybe. After 4 years of hiding who I really was, of minimizing my achievements and deflecting questions about my work, the truth was finally out in the open. The elevator chimed softly as it reached my floor, and the doors opened to reveal Emma waiting for me, her dark hair pulled back in a professional bun despite the late hour, wearing the black dress she kept in her office for emergency evening meetings. "You look like you've been through hell," she said by way of greeting. "Family dinner," I replied, which explained everything and nothing. "Henderson's team is getting restless. I've been feeding them coffee and those expensive cookies from the bakery downstairs, but they're clearly ready to either sign this deal or walk away." I nodded, straightening my shoulders and shifting into CEO mode. Whatever personal drama I was dealing with would have to wait. Right now I had a responsibility to my employees, to the company we'd all built together, to see this deal through to completion. Let's go close this acquisition. Conference Room A was our largest meeting space, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Denver skyline. During the day, you could see the Rocky Mountains stretching toward the horizon, but at night, the view was all city lights and urban energy. Henderson's team was exactly what I'd expected. 3 lawyers in expensive suits, a CFO who looked like she hadn't slept in days, and Marcus Henderson himself, a man in his early 60s with silver hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from decades of successful business deals. Mr. Henderson, I said, crossing the room to shake his hand. I apologize for keeping you waiting. Family obligations on Christmas Eve. Miss Peterson, he replied, his grip firm and his eyes sharp as they assessed me. No apology necessary. Family should always come first, though I appreciate you making time for this tonight. This acquisition is important to both our companies. I'm committed to seeing it through. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Henderson gestured toward the conference table where stacks of contracts and financial documents waited for our signatures. I've been following TechFlow's progress for the better part of 2 years, Ms. Peterson. What you've built here is impressive, especially considering you started with essentially nothing. Thank you. It's been a team effort from day one. Perhaps, but it takes a special kind of vision to see opportunities where others see obstacles. The Colorado Springs municipal contract, for example. Most tech companies wouldn't have bid on that project because the profit margins were too thin and the technical requirements too complex. But you saw it as a chance to prove your capabilities, and it paid off exponentially. I nodded, remembering the months of preparation that had gone into that bid, the sleepless nights spent developing innovative solutions to problems that seemed unsolvable. It had been a risk, taking on such a challenging project with such narrow margins for error, but it had established TechFlow as a company that could deliver on impossible promises. That's our philosophy, I said. Take on the projects that others won't touch, deliver solutions that exceed expectations, and build long-term relationships based on results rather than promises. Which brings us to tonight, Henderson said, settling into his chair and opening the folder of contracts in front of him. This acquisition will create some interesting synergies between our companies. Your innovation and agility, combined with our established client base and market reach. It's the kind of partnership that could reshape the entire regional tech landscape. For the next hour, we worked through the final details of the merger. Henderson's lawyers had questions about intellectual property transfers. His CFO wanted clarification on employee retention packages, and Henderson himself was particularly interested in our 5-year expansion plans. It was the kind of high-stakes business negotiation that I'd learned to navigate through trial and error, making mistakes and learning from them, building the skills and confidence that came with running a successful company. As we talked through revenue projections and market positioning strategies, I found myself thinking about Ryan's words earlier that evening. You're nothing. If he could see me now, sitting across from Marcus Henderson as an equal, discussing deals worth tens of millions of dollars, would he finally understand that his perception of me had been completely wrong? Or would he find some way to diminish this too, to explain away my success as luck or timing or anything other than my own capabilities and hard work? Miss Peterson? Henderson's voice pulled me back to the present. I asked about your post-acquisition role. Obviously, you'll remain as CEO of the combined entity, but I'm curious about your long-term vision for the company. My vision is to build something sustainable, I said, focusing on the question at hand. Not just profitable, but meaningful. Technology that solves real problems for real people. A company culture that values innovation and integrity equally. Growth that doesn't sacrifice our core values or our commitment to our employees. Henderson smiled, the first genuine warmth I'd seen from him all evening. That's exactly the kind of leadership philosophy we're looking for in a partner. Too many tech companies these days are focused solely on rapid growth and quick profits. It's refreshing to work with someone who takes a longer view. Business is about people, I said. The technology is just a tool. If you lose sight of the human element, you lose everything that makes the work worthwhile. Spoken like a true leader. By midnight, all the contracts were signed, all the legal requirements satisfied, all the financial transfers authorized. Henderson Industries and TechFlow Solutions were officially merged, creating a combined entity worth over $150 million. I was now the CEO of one of the largest independent tech companies in the Rocky Mountain region. As Henderson's team packed up their documents and prepared to leave, Marcus Henderson approached me one final time. This has been a pleasure, Ms. Peterson. I'm looking forward to working together in the new year. Likewise, thank you for being flexible with the timing tonight. Actually, I have to admit something. The rush to close tonight wasn't entirely about our fiscal year deadlines. Henderson smiled conspiratorially. I wanted to meet you in person, to get a sense of who you are as a leader. Closing a deal on Christmas Eve, bringing in your team on a holiday, managing complex negotiations under pressure. It tells me everything I need to know about your priorities and your capabilities. Was this a test? Everything in business is a test, Ms. Peterson. But you passed with flying colors. After Henderson's team left, I stood alone in conference room A, looking out at the city lights and trying to process everything that had happened in the past 4 hours. 4 hours ago, I'd been sitting in my parents' living room listening to my brother call me nothing while my family sat in uncomfortable silence. Now I was the CEO of a company worth $150 million, having just closed the largest acquisition in TechFlow's history. Emma appeared in the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. How are you feeling? Exhausted, exhilarated, confused. A little overwhelmed. The full CEO experience, in other words. I laughed, accepting the coffee gratefully. Something like that. So what happens now? With your family, I mean. It was the question I'd been avoiding. The one I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. I don't know. Everything's different now. They can't unknow what they learned tonight, and I can't go back to pretending to be someone I'm not. Do you want to go back? I considered the question seriously. There had been a certain comfort in the old dynamic, in being the family disappointment rather than the family success story. Success came with expectations, with pressure, with the weight of other people's hopes and dreams and judgments. No, I said finally, I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of making myself smaller so other people can feel bigger. If they can't handle who I really am, then that's their problem to solve, not mine. Good for you. You've worked too hard and accomplished too much to spend your life apologizing for your success. We stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the city sleep below us. Christmas morning was just hours away, and somewhere out there, families were gathering around trees, exchanging gifts, sharing meals, creating memories that would last a lifetime. I should go home, I said eventually. Get some sleep before tomorrow's phone calls start. Tomorrow's phone calls? My parents, my brother. Probably my extended family once word gets out. Everyone who thought they knew who I was and what I was capable of. Are you ready for those conversations? I thought about Ryan's face when Jessica's boss had confirmed my identity, the way his entire worldview had crumbled in the space of a single phone call. I thought about my parents' shocked silence, their sudden realization that their daughter had been living a completely different life than the one they'd imagined for her. I'm ready to be honest, I said. Finally, completely honest about who I am and what I've built. Whether they're ready to hear it is up to them. The elevator ride down to the parking garage was quiet, giving me time to think about the conversations that awaited me. There would be questions, lots of them. Why had I hidden my success? Why hadn't I trusted them with the truth? How long had I been planning to keep them in the dark? Some of those questions had easy answers. Others would require me to examine my own motivations, my own fears and insecurities, my own assumptions about what my family could and couldn't handle. As I drove through the empty streets toward my downtown loft, I realized that tonight had been about more than just closing a business deal or revealing a family secret. It had been about claiming my identity, owning my success, and refusing to be diminished by other people's limitations. For 4 years, I'd allowed my family's perceptions to dictate how I presented myself to them. I'd made myself smaller, quieter, less threatening because I'd been afraid of their reactions. But their reactions weren't my responsibility. My responsibility was to be authentic, to honor the work I'd done and the company I'd built, to stop apologizing for achieving things that others found uncomfortable or intimidating. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new opportunities to define the relationships I wanted to have with the people I loved. But tonight, for the first time in 4 years, I felt completely authentically myself. The woman who had walked into her parents' house earlier that evening, accepting condescending offers of help and diminishing comments about her life choices, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, clearer, more certain of her own worth and capabilities. My brother had called me nothing, but he'd been wrong about that too. I wasn't nothing. I was a CEO, an entrepreneur, a leader who had built something meaningful from nothing but an idea, and the determination to see it through. And tomorrow, when the phone calls started and the real conversations began, that's exactly who I planned to be. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of crisp, clear sky that makes Denver look like a postcard. I woke up in my loft to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, most of them from family members who had clearly been working the phone lines since I left the night before. The story was spreading through our extended family network like wildfire, each retelling probably more dramatic than the last. I made coffee and stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over Confluence Park where the South Platte River wound through the city like a silver ribbon. The view never got old, the way the morning light caught the water and reflected off the glass towers of downtown Denver. This was my sanctuary, the place I'd built for myself when I'd finally started making real money from TechFlow. Every piece of furniture, every carefully chosen art piece, every detail had been selected to remind me of how far I'd come from that scared college graduate who'd moved to Denver with nothing but dreams and determination. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Mom's name appeared on the screen, and I knew I couldn't avoid this conversation any longer. "Good morning, Mom. Merry Christmas." "Mica, sweetheart, I've been awake all night thinking about everything that happened yesterday." Her voice was strained, exhausted. "I feel like I don't even know my own daughter." "I'm the same person I've always been, Mom. The only thing that's changed is what you know about my life." "But why, honey? Why keep something this big from us for so long? Do you have any idea how it felt to find out from Jessica's boss that my daughter is some kind of business mogul? To realize that while I've been worrying about whether you have enough money for groceries, you've been running a company worth millions of dollars?" The hurt in her voice was genuine, and it cut deeper than Ryan's cruelty had the night before. I'd expected his jealousy and resentment, but Mom's pain was harder to bear because I knew I'd caused it through my own choices. I kept it secret because every time I tried to share anything about my work, it got dismissed or minimized. Remember when I told you about landing that first big client? Ryan spent the entire dinner explaining why I probably didn't deserve the credit. When I mentioned getting promoted to lead developer on a major project, Dad suggested that maybe I was just good at taking direction from men who really knew what they were doing. "We never meant to make you feel that way." "I know you didn't mean to, but the effect was the same, so I stopped sharing. It was easier to let you think I was struggling than to constantly defend my accomplishments against people who were supposed to believe in me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Mom spoke again, her voice was small and uncertain. "Have we really been that unsupportive? Your father and I thought we were being encouraging when we suggested you might want to consider more traditional career paths." "Traditional for who, Mom?" "Traditional for Ryan. Maybe, but not for me. I never wanted the suburban house and the corporate job and the minivan in the driveway. I wanted to build something, to create something that mattered. And I did that, but I did it without any support or encouragement from my family." "We love you, Mica. We've always loved you. I know you love me. But love isn't the same thing as respect or belief or understanding. You loved the version of me that fit into your expectations. You didn't know how to love the version of me that exceeded them." Another long pause. "What do we do now? How do we fix this?" "I don't know if it can be fixed, Mom. Too much damage has been done, too many years of hiding and pretending and making myself smaller. But maybe we can build something new, something based on who I actually am instead of who you thought I should be." "I'd like that. I'd like to try." "Good. But it has to be real this time. No more suggesting that I should find a nice man to take care of me. No more implying that my success is just luck or timing. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be based on mutual respect." "Of course, sweetheart. Of course." After we hung up, I felt emotionally drained but oddly hopeful. The conversation hadn't solved anything, but it was a start. Mom at least seemed willing to acknowledge that changes needed to be made, that the old dynamic wasn't working for anyone. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Ryan. "We need to talk. Can you come over?" I stared at the message for a long time, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him stew in his own discomfort for a while longer. But another part of me recognized that this conversation was inevitable, and it might as well happen sooner rather than later. "I'll be there in an hour," I texted back. Ryan and Jessica lived in a sprawling suburban development in Highlands Ranch, one of those communities where every house looked essentially the same but with slight variations in color and landscaping. Their house was a 4-bedroom colonial with a 3-car garage and a perfectly manicured front lawn. It was exactly the kind of life Ryan had always said he wanted, the kind of success he understood and valued. Jessica answered the door, her eyes red-rimmed and her usual polished appearance replaced by yoga pants and an oversized sweater. She looked like she hadn't slept any better than Mom had. "Mica, thank you for coming. Ryan's been pacing all morning, driving himself crazy." I followed her into their living room, which was decorated in the kind of neutral tones and generic furniture that came straight from a home decorating magazine. Everything was perfect and coordinated and completely impersonal, as if they'd hired a decorator to create the illusion of a life, rather than actually living one. Ryan was standing by the fireplace, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. His hair was disheveled, and he had the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd spent the night staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation and interaction from the past several years. "Mica," he said when he saw me, his voice hoarse. "Jesus, I don't even know where to start." "How about with an apology?" I suggested, settling into their expensive leather chair and crossing my legs. "That seems like a reasonable place to begin." "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. What I said last night, calling you nothing, it was inexcusable. I was drunk and stupid and jealous, and I took it out on you in the worst possible way." "You weren't drunk, Ryan. You'd had maybe 2 glasses of wine over the course of 3 hours. You said what you said because you believed it, because you've spent years convincing yourself that your version of success is the only version that matters." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "That's not true." "Isn't it? How many times have you made comments about my life choices? How many times have you suggested that I should settle down, get a real job, stop chasing impossible dreams? You didn't accidentally stumble into cruelty last night, Ryan. You've been building toward it for years." Jessica shifted uncomfortably on the couch, clearly wanting to defend her husband but unable to argue with the truth of what I was saying. "I was trying to protect you," Ryan said weakly. "I was trying to save you from disappointment and failure. No, you were trying to make yourself feel better about your own limitations. My success threatens your worldview, Ryan. It always has. If your little sister can build a $150 million company from nothing, what does that say about your own achievements? What does that say about the choices you've made?" "I've done well for myself," he protested. "I have a good job, a nice house, a stable life." "You have a fine life," I agreed. "A perfectly adequate, middle-class, suburban life. There's nothing wrong with that if it's what you want. But it's not what I wanted, and you never could accept that someone in our family might want something bigger." "Bigger," he repeated, his voice bitter. "Is that what this is about? Proving that you're better than the rest of us? This is about proving that I'm capable of more than you thought I was. All of you. For years you've treated me like the family charity case, the one who needed help and guidance and gentle suggestions about how to live my life. Even last night, Jessica offered to help me get a job as an administrative assistant." Jessica's face flushed red. "I was trying to be helpful." "I thought you were struggling." "I know you were trying to help, but don't you see how condescending that was? I founded a tech company that employs over 200 people. I've been featured in Forbes and Entrepreneur magazine. I spoke at the Colorado Tech Summit last year about innovation in renewable energy software. And you offered to help me get a job answering phones." "We didn't know," Jessica said defensively. "You never told us any of that. Because every time I tried to share anything about my work, it got minimized or explained away. So I stopped trying. I built my life and my career without your input or approval, And it turns out I didn't need either. Ryan slumped into the chair across from me, his face gray with exhaustion and something that might have been grief. I've been such an ass. All these years I've been lecturing you about responsibility and success, and you are already more successful than I'll ever be. Success isn't a competition, Ryan. There's room for both of us to do well, to be happy, to build meaningful lives. But you made it a competition. You decided that my success somehow diminished yours, so you spent years trying to convince me that I was failing. What do I do now? How do I fix this? I looked at him sitting there, this man who had shared a childhood with me, who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework, and been my partner in countless childhood adventures. Somewhere along the way, he'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone driven by insecurity and resentment instead of love and support. I don't know if you can fix it, I said honestly. Trust is like glass, Ryan. Once it's broken, it's never quite the same, even if you manage to piece it back together. But you're willing to try? I'm willing to see if there's anything left worth salvaging. But it would require you to fundamentally change how you see me, how you talk to me, how you think about success and family, and what it means to support someone you love. I can do that. Can you? Can you really? Because it's not just about apologizing for last night. It's about acknowledging that you've been wrong about me for years. It's about accepting that your little sister built something you couldn't, achieved something you never imagined possible, and did it all without your help or approval. The words hung in the air between us, brutal in their honesty but necessary. Ryan needed to understand that this wasn't just about one cruel comment made in a moment of anger. This was about years of systematic dismissal, years of treating me like a child who needed guidance rather than a capable adult who had chosen a different path. You're right, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. You're absolutely right. I've been threatened by your independence since you left for college. When you moved to Denver, I kept waiting for you to fail, to come home with your tail between your legs and admit that I'd been right about the dangers of chasing unrealistic dreams. And when I didn't fail, I convinced myself that you were just postponing the inevitable, that eventually, reality would catch up with you, and you'd need the family safety net. It made me feel important, being the responsible one, the one who could offer wisdom and guidance to my struggling sister. Except I wasn't struggling. No, you weren't. You were thriving. And I couldn't stand it. Every time you deflected questions about your work, I told myself it was because you were embarrassed about your lack of success. It never occurred to me that you might be protecting yourself from my jealousy and judgment. Jessica reached over and took his hand, her expression pained. She was seeing a side of her husband that probably wasn't particularly attractive, the petty, insecure side that he usually managed to keep hidden behind his confident exterior. What about your job? I asked. Your promotion, your corner office, your company car? Were you lying about those too? No, that's all real, but it's not nearly as impressive as I made it sound. I'm a regional sales director for a mid-sized insurance company. I make decent money, but nothing spectacular. Certainly nothing compared to what you've accomplished. Insurance is important work, Ryan. People need insurance. There's nothing shameful about having a solid, stable career in a necessary industry. But it's not exciting, it's not innovative. It's not the kind of thing that gets written about in business magazines or attracts attention from venture capitalists. So, not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur or a tech innovator. The world needs insurance salespeople too. But you couldn't be content with doing good work in a solid industry. You had to make me feel small in order to make yourself feel big. I know, I see that now. And I hate myself for it. Self-hatred isn't going to fix anything, Ryan. Understanding is what matters. Understanding why you did what you did, and committing to doing better going forward. How do I do better? How do I support you when I don't even understand what you do? You start by asking questions instead of making assumptions. You start by listening when I talk about my work instead of looking for ways to minimize it. You start by treating me like an adult who's capable of making her own decisions about her life and career. And if I mess up, if I fall back into old patterns, then I'll call you on it. And you'll apologize, and you'll try to do better next time. That's how relationships work, Ryan. They require ongoing effort and mutual respect. Jessica spoke up for the first time in several minutes. Mica, I owe you an apology too, for offering to help you get that job, for assuming you needed my assistance, for never bothering to find out what you actually did for work. Thank you. That means a lot. I have to ask though, the money, the success, the company, are you happy? I mean, really happy? The question caught me off guard. In all the conversations about my career and achievements, no one had bothered to ask whether I was actually enjoying the life I'd built. Most of the time, yes. I love what I do. I love the challenges and the problem solving and the satisfaction of building something meaningful. I love my team, the people I work with every day. I love knowing that the software we develop makes people's lives easier and more efficient. But it's lonely sometimes. Success can be isolating, especially when you can't share it with the people you love. For 4 years, I've been celebrating achievements and processing setbacks essentially by myself. That's part of why I kept everything secret. It was easier to be alone with my success than to constantly defend it. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it was still better than the alternative, which was pretending to be someone I'm not in order to make other people comfortable. We talked for another hour, working through years of misunderstandings and resentments, laying the groundwork for what might eventually become a healthier relationship. There were no magic solutions, no sudden transformations that would erase the damage that had been done. But there was a willingness to try, to do the hard work of rebuilding trust and respect. When I finally left their house, I felt cautiously optimistic about the possibility of reconciliation. Ryan seemed genuinely committed to changing his perspective, and Jessica appeared relieved to finally understand the family dynamics she'd been navigating blindly for 2 years. The drive back to downtown Denver gave me time to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. Yesterday morning, I'd been dreading another family Christmas filled with subtle criticism and well-meaning interference. Now I was the acknowledged CEO of a major tech company, having just completed the largest acquisition in my company's history while simultaneously revealing 4 years' worth of carefully guarded secrets. My phone rang as I was pulling into the parking garage beneath my building. Emma's name appeared on the screen and I realized I hadn't checked in with her since the Henderson deal had closed. "How's your Christmas morning?" she asked when I answered. "Complicated. Family conversations, apologies, attempts at reconciliation. The usual holiday drama, just with higher stakes than usual. Are you okay? You sound exhausted." "I am exhausted. But I'm also relieved. The secret's out, for better or worse. No more hiding, no more pretending to be someone I'm not." "Good for you. You've carried that burden long enough." "What about you? Shouldn't you be opening presents with your family instead of checking on me?" "Already done. My nieces are currently in a sugar coma from too much Christmas candy, and my sister kicked me out of the kitchen because I was hovering while she cooked dinner. I thought I'd check on my workaholic boss to make sure she wasn't sitting alone in her office on Christmas Day." I smiled, grateful for Emma's friendship as much as her professional support. "I'm home, actually. Standing in my living room looking out at the city trying to figure out what comes next." "What does come next?" "I don't know. For the first time in 4 years, I get to be completely myself with my family. That's either going to be wonderful or catastrophic, and probably both." "Well, whatever happens, you know you've got people who support you, not just as CEO, but as a person. Your TechFlow family, if you will." "That means more than you know, Emma. Thank you." "Anytime, boss. Now go enjoy the rest of your Christmas. And try not to think about work for at least a few hours." After we hung up, I stood at my windows watching the city celebrate Christmas. Below me, families walking along the South Platte Trail, couples strolling through Confluence Park, children playing in the snow that had accumulated overnight, normal people living normal lives, dealing with normal family dynamics and normal holiday traditions. My life wasn't normal, and it never would be. I'd built something extraordinary, achieved a level of success that most people only dreamed about. But success came with a price, and part of that price was the isolation that came from being different, from wanting different things and achieving different outcomes than the people around me. For 4 years, I'd tried to minimize that difference, to hide my achievements in order to maintain relationships with people who couldn't handle the truth of who I'd become. But hiding hadn't protected those relationships. If anything, it had made them more fragile, built as they were on lies and misconceptions. Now the truth was out, and we'd all have to learn how to navigate this new reality. Some relationships might not survive the adjustment. Others might emerge stronger than ever. But at least everything would be based on honesty instead of pretense. My brother had called me nothing, but he'd been wrong about that too. I wasn't nothing. I was exactly who I'd always wanted to be. Independent, successful, building meaningful work that made a difference in the world. The fact that my family had never seen or acknowledged that person didn't make her any less real. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new opportunities to define who I wanted to be and how I wanted to live. But today, for the first time in years, I could simply be myself without apology or explanation. That felt like the best Christmas gift I'd ever received. 3 weeks after Christmas, I was sitting in my office reviewing quarterly projections when Emma knocked on my door with an expression I'd learned to recognize over the years. It was her interesting development face, the one that usually preceded unexpected news that would require immediate attention. "What is it?" I asked, setting aside the financial reports. "Your brother's here. He's downstairs in the lobby, asking to see you. No appointment, but he says it's important." I glanced at my calendar, noting the back-to-back meetings scheduled for the rest of the afternoon. Did he say what it was about? Something about a business proposal. He's wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase, so he's definitely not here for a social call. Ryan hadn't contacted me since our conversation at his house, though Mom had mentioned that he'd been asking questions about TechFlow, researching the company online, trying to understand what I'd actually built. I'd assumed it was simple curiosity, his way of processing the reality of my success. But a business proposal suggested something more calculated. "Send him up. Clear my next meeting if you need to." "Are you sure? You've got the Henderson Industries conference call in 20 minutes. Reschedule it. Whatever Ryan wants to discuss, I'd rather get it over with." 10 minutes later, Ryan appeared in my doorway, and I barely recognized him. Gone was the casual confidence he'd always worn like armor, replaced by something that looked remarkably like humility. His suit was expensive but conservative, his hair perfectly styled, his entire demeanor professional, in a way I'd never seen from him before. "Mica, thank you for seeing me. I know you're busy. Come in, sit down. You look nervous." "I am nervous." He settled into the chair across from my desk, placing his briefcase carefully beside him. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since Christmas. A lot of research about your company and the industry you work in." "Research?" "I've read every article about TechFlow I could find. Forbes, Entrepreneur, Denver Business Journal, Colorado Tech Weekly. I watched your presentation from the Colorado Tech Summit on YouTube. I even bought a book about the software development industry so I could understand what you actually do." The admission surprised me. Ryan had never shown interest in learning about anything that didn't directly relate to his own life and career. The fact that he'd spent weeks educating himself about my work suggested a level of commitment to change that I hadn't expected. That must have been illuminating. It was humbling. "Do you know what the Forbes article said about you?" I shook my head, though I had a good idea which article he was referring to. "It called you one of the most innovative entrepreneurs in the Rocky Mountain region. It said TechFlow was revolutionizing how municipalities manage their digital infrastructure, and that your renewable energy software could transform how cities approach sustainability." The writer predicted that within 5 years, every major city in the western United States would be using TechFlow solutions. Business journalists tend toward hyperbole. Maybe. But the technical details they included, the specific examples of problems your software has solved, the quotes from city managers and environmental scientists. "Mica, I had no idea. I genuinely had no idea what you'd accomplished. I tried to tell you, Ryan, multiple times over the years. You tried to tell me, and I refused to listen. I was so invested in my version of who you were that I couldn't hear what you were actually saying." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you acknowledgement of just how wrong I was, how completely I misunderstood and underestimated you." Thank you. That means something. I hope it does, because what I'm about to propose depends on you believing that I've genuinely changed my perspective. He opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder, placing it on my desk between us. The tab was labeled Peterson Insurance and Risk Management Technology Integration Proposal. A business proposal? My company is hemorrhaging clients because our technology infrastructure is outdated and inefficient. We're still using software systems that were cutting edge in 2015, and our competitors are eating our lunch. Our client portal crashes regularly, our data analysis tools are primitive, and our mobile applications are basically unusable. I opened the folder, scanning the executive summary and technical specifications he'd compiled. The document was thorough, professionally formatted, and surprisingly well-researched. He'd identified specific problems with his company's current systems and proposed detailed solutions that aligned perfectly with TechFlow's capabilities. This is impressive work, Ryan. You've clearly put a lot of effort into understanding both your company's needs and our potential solutions. I've been working on it every night for 3 weeks. Jessica helped with the financial projections, and I hired a tech consultant to review the technical specifications to make sure I wasn't proposing something impossible. Why bring this to me? There are other companies that could handle this kind of system overhaul. Because I want to work with the best. And I want to prove to you that I can separate my personal relationship with my sister from my professional obligations to my company. I want to show you that I respect your expertise enough to trust you with something this important. I studied the proposal more carefully, noting the scope of work and the projected timeline. It was a significant project, probably worth close to $2 million in revenue for TechFlow, but it would also require a substantial commitment of resources and personnel. This would be a major undertaking, Ryan, 6 months minimum, possibly longer depending on how complex your legacy systems are. And it would require close collaboration between our teams, which means you and I would be working together regularly. I understand that. I'm prepared for it. Are you? Because this wouldn't be a favor to my brother or a family obligation. This would be a professional relationship between two business entities, with all the expectations and standards that entails. If TechFlow takes on this project, we'd expect the same level of commitment and performance from your company that we demand from all our clients. I wouldn't want it any other way. I leaned back in my chair, considering the proposal and the man sitting across from me. 3 weeks ago, Ryan had called me nothing, had dismissed my entire career as fantasy and pretense. Now he was asking me to essentially save his company, while proving that he could treat me as an equal rather than a little sister who needed guidance. Can I ask you something? Of course. Is this about making amends, or is it about genuine business need? Because if you're proposing this project as some kind of elaborate apology, that's not fair to either of us. It's both, he said honestly. My company genuinely needs this upgrade. We're losing clients every quarter because our technology can't compete with more modern firms. But you're right that there's also a personal element. I want to prove to myself as much as to you that I can work with you professionally, that I can value your expertise without letting my ego get in the way. And if the answer is no, if TechFlow declines to take on this project, then I'll find another solution and I'll respect your decision. But I hope you'll at least consider it on its merits. I spent the next hour reviewing the proposal in detail while Ryan waited patiently, answering my questions about his company's current systems and explaining the business challenges they were facing. His answers were knowledgeable and precise, suggesting he'd done far more research than just compiling a folder of specifications. Your current client management system is worse than I thought, I said finally. How have you been maintaining any kind of customer satisfaction with software this outdated? Honestly, we haven't been. Our customer retention rate has dropped 15% in the past 2 years, and most of the exit interviews cite poor technology experience as a primary factor. And your management team is committed to a major technology overhaul? They're desperate for one. When I presented this proposal to our board last week, they approved it unanimously. They said if TechFlow could deliver what I was promising, it would be the best investment the company had made in a decade. You presented this to your board before talking to me? Ryan's face reddened slightly. I was confident you'd say yes. That was presumptuous. It was. But I also knew that if you agreed to consider it, you'd want to know that my company was fully committed to moving forward. I didn't want you to think this was just my pet project. I had to admit, his preparation was impressive. He'd anticipated my questions, addressed potential concerns, and demonstrated a level of professional competence I'd never seen from him before. Whatever else this proposal represented, it was solid business. I'll need to review this with my technical team before making any commitments. This kind of integration project touches every department, and I can't approve it without input from the people who would actually be doing the work. Of course. How long do you think that review process might take? 2 weeks, maybe 3. We'd need to audit your current systems, assess the complexity of the migration, and determine whether we have the bandwidth to take on a project this size without impacting our existing clients. I understand. And Mica? Thank you for taking this seriously. I know it would be easy to dismiss this as some kind of family obligation or guilt-motivated gesture, but I hope you'll evaluate it purely on its business merits. That's exactly what I intend to do. After Ryan left, I sat alone in my office trying to process what had just happened. In the space of 3 weeks, my brother had transformed from someone who fundamentally misunderstood my work to someone who could present a sophisticated technology proposal with genuine business value. The change was so dramatic it was almost disorienting. Emma appeared in my doorway a few minutes later, her curiosity evident. How did that go? You were in there for almost 2 hours. He brought me a business proposal. A legitimate one, actually. His company needs a complete technology overhaul, and he wants TechFlow to handle it. Quote, "And how do you feel about working with your brother professionally?" Complicated. Part of me is impressed by the work he put into this proposal. He clearly spent weeks learning about our industry and understanding his company's needs. But another part of me wonders if this is his way of trying to prove something, either to me or to himself. Does it matter? If the project is viable and profitable, does his motivation really change the business value? No, but it changes the personal dynamic. If he's doing this to prove he can work with me as an equal, what happens if the project runs into problems? What happens if we have professional disagreements? Or if his company doesn't perform up to our standards? You handle it the same way you'd handle those issues with any other client. Professionally, directly, with clear expectations and consistent standards. Easy to say, harder to do when the client is your brother and every interaction is loaded with years of family history. True, but maybe that's exactly why you should take on the project. Maybe the only way to really change your relationship is to prove to both of you that you can work together as business equals. I considered Emma's perspective while reviewing Ryan's proposal for the 3rd time. The technical requirements were complex but manageable, the timeline was realistic, and the financial terms were more than fair. From a purely business standpoint, it was exactly the kind of project TechFlow was designed to handle. That afternoon, I called a meeting with my senior technical staff to review the proposal. David, my CTO, was immediately interested in the challenge of modernizing such an outdated system. Sarah, our lead systems architect, pointed out several potential complications but agreed they were all solvable with proper planning. Michael, our project manager, thought the timeline was aggressive but achievable with the right resource allocation. The client seems to have done his homework, David observed, flipping through the technical specifications. These requirements are detailed and realistic. Whoever compiled this actually understands both their current limitations and our capabilities. That's my brother, I said, earning surprised looks from around the conference table. Personal relationship aside, do we want this project? From a technical standpoint, absolutely, Sarah said. It's the kind of comprehensive integration that showcases all our strengths. Plus, insurance companies have been underserved by the tech industry for years. If we do this right, it could open up an entire new market sector for us. The revenue projections are solid too, added Jennifer, our CFO. $2 million in direct income, plus potential for ongoing maintenance contracts and future expansion projects. It's a significant growth opportunity. By the end of the meeting, the consensus was clear. Personal complications aside, this was a project worth pursuing. The question wasn't whether TechFlow could deliver on the technical requirements, but whether I could manage the family dynamics that would inevitably arise. That evening, I called my parents to tell them about Ryan's proposal. Mom was thrilled at the prospect of her children working together professionally, though I could hear the underlying worry in her voice about what might happen if the collaboration went badly. Do you think it's wise, honey? Mixing family and business? Probably not. But Ryan's company genuinely needs help, and TechFlow is probably the best firm in the region to provide it. If I turn him down for personal reasons, I'm not being fair to either his company or mine. And you think you can work with him? After everything that's happened? I think we're about to find out. This project will either prove that we can have a professional relationship based on mutual respect, or it will demonstrate that too much damage has been done for us to work together effectively. What does your gut tell you? I considered the question seriously. My gut tells me that Ryan is genuinely trying to change, to see me as a peer rather than a little sister who needs guidance. The work he put into this proposal suggests a level of respect for my expertise that he's never shown before. But I'm not sure if his motivation is about respecting me as a businesswoman or about proving to himself that he can handle working with someone he's spent years underestimating. There's a difference between those two things, and I'm not sure which one is driving this proposal. Does it matter as long as the end result is positive? Maybe not. Maybe the motivation is less important than the outcome. If this project forces us both to interact as professionals rather than siblings, it might change our relationship for the better, regardless of why he initiated it. 2 days later, I called Ryan to schedule a formal presentation meeting with his company's board of directors. If TechFlow was going to take on this project, I wanted to ensure that everyone involved understood the scope, timeline, and expectations from the beginning. Really? You're willing to move forward? I'm willing to explore it further. But this has to be handled exactly like any other potential client engagement. Formal presentations, detailed contracts, clear performance metrics. No family discounts, no special considerations. No assumption that personal relationships will smooth over professional disagreements. I understand completely. When can we schedule the presentation? Next Friday afternoon. I'll bring David and Sarah to discuss the technical aspects, and Jennifer will cover the financial terms. You should have whoever makes technology decisions for your company present, along with anyone who would be involved in the day-to-day implementation. Perfect. Mica, I can't tell you how much this means to me. It doesn't mean anything yet, Ryan. We're just having a conversation about a potential business relationship. The real test will be whether both our companies can deliver on our commitments. Fair enough, but for what it's worth, I'm more excited about this project than I've been about anything work-related in years. After we hung up, I found myself cautiously optimistic about the possibility of working with Ryan professionally. The proposal itself was solid, his company clearly needed the services TechFlow could provide, and his approach had been respectful and well-prepared. More importantly, this project represented an opportunity to redefine our relationship on entirely new terms. For years, our interactions had been defined by family dynamics, childhood roles, and Ryan's inability to see me as anything other than his little sister who needed guidance and protection. But a professional relationship would require him to acknowledge my expertise, respect my decisions, and treat me as an equal. If he could manage that, it might open the door to a healthier personal relationship as well. The following Friday, I walked into Henderson Insurance and Risk Management's conference room with my senior team, prepared to deliver the kind of presentation that had made TechFlow's reputation in the Denver business community. Ryan was there, along with his CEO, the head of IT, and 3 board members who would ultimately decide whether to approve the project. For the next 90 minutes, I forgot that Ryan was my brother. He became simply another client representative, asking intelligent questions about implementation timelines and system integration challenges. His colleagues were clearly impressed by both the scope of our proposal and the depth of our technical expertise. When the presentation ended, Ryan's CEO shook my hand with genuine enthusiasm. Ms. Peterson, if TechFlow can deliver what you're promising, this partnership could transform our entire business model. Your team's approach to legacy system integration is exactly what we've been looking for. We're confident we can meet your needs, I replied. The question is whether your organization is prepared for the level of change this modernization will require. We're ready. We've been ready for years. Ryan, I don't know how you managed to convince TechFlow to take us on as a client, but this might be the best business development work you've ever done. As we packed up our materials and prepared to leave, Ryan approached me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pride, but not the self-congratulatory pride he usually displayed after closing a sale. This was something quieter, more genuine. "Thank you, Mica, for taking the proposal seriously, for treating my company like any other potential client, for giving me the chance to prove that I can work with you professionally. The real test starts now, Ryan. Presentations are easy. Delivering on promises is where things get complicated. I know, but I'm ready for complicated. I'm ready to see what we can accomplish when we're actually working together instead of against each other." Looking at him standing there in his company's conference room, surrounded by colleagues who clearly respected his business judgment, I realized that my brother had grown up in ways I hadn't noticed. The man who had called me nothing 3 weeks earlier was gone, replaced by someone who could present sophisticated technology proposals and speak knowledgeably about system integration challenges. Maybe people really could change. Maybe relationships really could be rebuilt on stronger foundations. Maybe this project would prove that Ryan and I could be more than just siblings struggling with old resentments and misunderstandings. Or maybe it would crash and burn spectacularly, destroying both our professional relationship and any chance of rebuilding our personal one. Either way, we were about to find out. The contract was signed the following week, officially making Henderson Insurance and Risk Management TechFlow's newest client. As I reviewed the final documents, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. 6 months ago, Ryan had been lecturing me about getting a real job and finding stability. Now he was paying my company $2 million to solve problems he couldn't handle himself. Sometimes life had a sense of humor after all. 6 months later, I stood in the same conference room where Ryan had first presented his technology proposal, watching his team demonstrate their newly implemented client management system. The transformation was remarkable. What had once been a clunky, outdated interface that frustrated both employees and customers had become a sleek, intuitive platform that streamlined every aspect of their business operations. Customer satisfaction scores are up 37%, Ryan was explaining to his board of directors, his voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. Client retention has improved by 22%, and our new business acquisition rate has nearly doubled. The TechFlow integration exceeded every projection we made. I listened from the back of the room, officially there for the final project review, but personally witnessing something far more significant. This wasn't just a successful technology implementation. It was proof that Ryan had fundamentally changed how he approached both business and relationships. Over the past 6 months, working together had forced us to develop an entirely new dynamic. Ryan couldn't rely on old patterns of dismissiveness or condescension when he needed my expertise to save his company. I couldn't retreat into defensive silence when his business depended on clear communication and collaborative problem-solving. The project had its challenging moments. There were heated discussions about implementation timelines, disagreements over future priorities, and one particularly tense meeting where Ryan's CEO questioned whether TechFlow was moving fast enough to meet their deadlines. But through it all, Ryan had supported my team's decisions publicly and worked through his concerns with me privately, like a professional partner rather than a threatened sibling. The success of this project, Ryan continued, wouldn't have been possible without the exceptional team at TechFlow Solutions. Their CEO, Mica demonstrated the kind of innovative thinking and technical expertise that our industry desperately needs. I felt something warm and unfamiliar settle in my chest. Pride, but not the defensive pride I had felt when proving people wrong. This was the quiet satisfaction of being recognized for my actual contributions, valued for my real capabilities. After the presentation ended and the board members filed out, Ryan approached me with a smile that reminded me of the brother I'd grown up with, before years of competition and misunderstanding had complicated our relationship. "So, what's the verdict? Did TechFlow deliver on its promises?" "Your customer satisfaction scores speak for themselves. This was exactly the kind of outcome we hoped for when we took on the project." "And personally, how do you think we did working together?" I considered the question seriously. "Better than I expected. You respected my team's expertise, you communicated clearly about your company's needs, and you handled disagreements professionally. You were a good client, Ryan. Just a good client? You were also a brother who finally saw his sister as she really is, instead of who he thought she should be. Ryan's expression grew serious. I owe you more than a successful business project, Mica. I owe you years of apologies for not seeing what was right in front of me. For treating your success like a threat, instead of celebrating it like the achievement it is. The apologies matter, but the change in behavior matters more. You've proven that you can work with me as an equal, that you can respect my decisions even when you don't fully understand them. I'm still learning. About technology, about leadership, about what it means to truly support someone you love. But I want to keep learning, if you'll let me. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Henderson Industries just called. They want to discuss another acquisition. This one's even bigger than the last. I showed Ryan the message, watching his face light up with genuine excitement. That's incredible, Mica. How big are we talking? We're talking about TechFlow becoming one of the major players in the national tech market. We're talking about expansion into new cities, new industries, new challenges that will push everything we've built to the next level. Are you ready for that? That kind of growth? That level of responsibility? I've been ready for years. I just needed the right opportunities and the right team to make it happen. And the right family support? I looked at my brother, this man who had spent years seeing me as someone I never was, who had finally learned to see me as someone I'd always been. That would be nice too. 3 weeks later, we were back at Mom and Dad's house for Sunday dinner. A new tradition we'd started after the Christmas revelation. The conversation around the table was different now, filled with genuine questions about my work, respectful curiosity about my industry, and something that had been missing for years: pride in my accomplishments. Tell us about this new acquisition, Dad said, passing the potatoes with the kind of attentive interest he usually reserved for Ryan's work stories. Henderson Industries wants to merge with a California-based firm that specializes in renewable energy software. If the deal goes through, TechFlow would become the primary technology partner for over 200 municipalities across the western United States. 200 cities, Mom repeated, shaking her head in amazement. Honey, do you ever stop and think about how many people's lives your work affects? Every day. That's what makes it meaningful. We're not just writing code or building systems. We're helping cities become more efficient, more sustainable, more responsive to their citizens' needs. Ryan leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. I've been reading about smart city initiatives in the trade publications. Your renewable energy management systems are mentioned in almost every article about municipal technology trends. You've been reading trade publications? I told you I was committed to learning about your industry. I want to understand what my sister does for a living, really understand it. Jessica, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, spoke up with a wry smile. Ryan's become quite the tech enthusiast. He lectures me about software optimization at least twice a week now. Someone has to keep up with the family genius, Ryan said, but there was no resentment in his voice, just affection and respect. As dinner wound down and we moved to the living room for coffee, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed since that Christmas Eve, when everything had been revealed. The secret was out, the relationships were rebuilt on honest foundations, and for the first time in years, I felt completely comfortable being myself around my family. My phone buzzed with another message from Emma. Henderson deal is confirmed. Congratulations, boss. You're about to become the CEO of a $300 million company. I stared at the number, trying to process what it meant. $300 million. 800 employees across multiple states. Technology solutions that would affect millions of people's daily lives. It was beyond anything I'd imagined when I'd started TechFlow in a borrowed office space, with nothing but a business plan and determination. Everything okay? Mom asked, noticing my expression. The Henderson acquisition just went through. TechFlow is now worth $300 million. The room fell silent for a moment, everyone processing the magnitude of what I'd just announced. Then Dad started laughing, a deep, joyful sound that filled the entire house. $300 million, he repeated. Our daughter built a $300 million company, and we spent years worrying about whether she had enough money for groceries. I always had enough money for groceries, Dad. We know that now. But at the time, we were so focused on our own limited understanding of success that we couldn't see what you were actually accomplishing. Ryan raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. To my sister, the CEO of a $300 million company, who somehow managed to forgive her family for being complete idiots about her success. To family? I countered, raising my own cup. The people who drive you crazy but love you anyway. To family, they echoed, and for the first time in years, the word felt completely true. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. From the college graduate with big dreams to the CEO of a major technology company. From the sister who hid her success to protect herself from judgment to the woman who could share her achievements with confidence and pride. Ryan had called me nothing, but he'd been wrong about everything. I wasn't nothing. I was exactly who I'd always known I could become, if I just had the courage to keep building, keep growing, keep believing in my own vision, even when nobody else could see it. The city lights stretched out before me as I drove through downtown Denver, each light representing someone whose life was touched by the technology my company had created. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build something meaningful and lasting. But tonight I was simply grateful. Grateful for the success I'd earned, the relationships I'd rebuilt, and the family who had finally learned to see me as I really was. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. But even better than revenge is the moment when you no longer need it. When success becomes about building rather than proving, about creating rather than vindicating. I wasn't nothing. I never had been, and finally, everyone could see it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Hi, I'm Mica, and 3 years ago at Christmas dinner, my brother Ryan looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're nothing," while the whole family sat there in uncomfortable silence. What he didn't know was that his wife's boss would call me 20 minutes later, and the word that came out of his mouth would change everything. CEO. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The snow was falling heavy outside my parents' house in Lakewood that Christmas Eve, the kind of thick, wet flakes that stick to everything and make the world look like a postcard. I sat in my Honda Civic for a moment before going inside, watching the warm golden lights spill from the windows of the house I grew up in. Through the front window, I could see Ryan already holding court in the living room, his arms gesturing dramatically as he told some story that had Mom and Dad hanging on every word. I took a deep breath and checked my phone one more time. 3 missed calls from my assistant Emma, 2 from my COO, and a string of texts about the Henderson Industries merger that was supposed to close after the holiday. I silenced the phone and slipped it into my purse. Tonight was about family, even if family had a way of making me feel like I was still the awkward teenager who spent Christmas mornings cleaning up wrapping paper while Ryan showed off his latest achievements. The front door opened before I could knock. Mom appeared in her festive red sweater, the same one she'd worn every Christmas for the past 5 years, her face lighting up with genuine warmth. "Mica, sweetheart, you made it!" I was starting to worry about the roads. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, the sense of her famous sugar cookies that had been baking all day. "Sorry I'm late, Mom." Traffic was brutal coming down from downtown. I handed her the bottle of wine I'd brought, a vintage Cabernet that had cost more than my parents spent on groceries in a week, though I'd never tell them that. "Downtown." Dad's voice came from behind Mom, warm but tinged with the familiar note of concern that crept in whenever we talked about my living situation. "I still don't understand why you insist on staying in that expensive loft when you could get so much more space out here in the suburbs." I kissed his cheek, breathing in the familiar scent of his aftershave, mixed with wood smoke from the fireplace. "I like being close to work, Dad." "The commute would kill me." Ryan's voice boomed from the living room before Dad could respond. "Is that my little sister? Get in here, Mica." "Jessica's been dying to hear about your latest temp job adventures." The words hit me like a slap, casual and cutting in the way only family could manage. I forced a smile and followed my parents into the living room, where Ryan was sprawled on the couch like he owned the place, one arm draped around his wife Jessica. He'd put on weight since his wedding 2 years ago, his face fuller and his hairline creeping back, but he still carried himself with the same confident swagger that had made him the golden child our entire lives. Jessica looked up from her phone with a polite smile. She was prettier than I remembered, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the snow, wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Mica, so good to see you again." Ryan was just telling us about his promotion to regional sales director. "Congratulations," I said, meaning it despite everything. Ryan had always been good at sales, probably because he genuinely believed everything he said, even when it wasn't entirely true. "That's a big step up. 20% raise, corner office, company car." Ryan ticked off the benefits on his fingers. "Not bad for someone who barely graduated college, right, Dad?" Dad chuckled, settling into his recliner with the satisfaction of a man whose son had exceeded expectations. "Your mother and I are proud of both our children,"